Hi, welcome back to our read aloud. Streams to the river, river to the sea. I'm snug in my snuggly bed. I'm going to read to you. Maybe you're in your bed right now, or maybe you're relaxing or about to go to bed. This is chapter 16. How the sickness came upon me was a mystery. Early the next day before dawn, I woke, sweating all over. By sunrise, I was cold, as if my blood had turned to water. I was too sick to make a fire, which I did every morning. Charbonneau came and stood over me. Why you sleep? He wanted to know. Charbonneau hungry. Captain Clark, he hungry. What for no fire? I was too weak to answer. Even when he gave me a prod with his foot, I said nothing. Captain Clark got up and looked at me. He put his hand on my forehead. This girl is feverish, he said to Charbonneau. You make the fire while I give her some medicine. The medicine, a spoonful of black stuff in a cup of water, felt bitter in my throat. Worse, much worse than the pieces of snake rattle they made me swallow the day Miko was born. It did no good. When they were ready to leave, I was so weak they had to carry me to the boat. I lay all that morning with a heavy blanket over me, though the sun was hot. I watched the sun move among the clouds, casting light. Then shadows. In the shadows, I saw strange faces I had never seen before. I shut my eyes in fear of them until the sun came out again. Captain Clark gave me another cup of the black stuff. Twice I roused myself to nurse the baby, but that was all. The river ran swift that day. The men with the poles pushing and those near the bank pulling on the ropes tired early. Captain Clark decided to make camp long before nightfall. He was worried about my sickness. I heard him outside the tent talking to Captain Lewis and Charbonneau. I understood most of what he said. What if she dies? Captain Lewis said. What can we do with the baby? We can't drag it across the mountains all the way to the sea. It can't eat buffalo or deer meat or duck or goose. It drinks milk. We have no milk. I say send her back to Fort Mandan before something happens. There will be some woman at the fort who can feed the baby. It's better to take a chance on her getting well, Captain Clark said. For one thing, the men all like her. She livens their spirits, and just as important, she has a good effect upon the Indians we meet. Seeing a girl and a baby with us, they see that we mean them no harm and wish to be friends. Another thing, we are coming into mountain country that she knows, where we'll no longer need boats, but the horses she can find for us. We need this girl badly. What do you say? Captain Lewis asked Charbonneau. You are her husband. I was not surprised at his answer. She die? Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau die, he said. Better we go back, quick. I was not surprised because I knew why he wanted to return to Fort Mandan. He had not wanted to leave in the first place. He had fought with the captains and only made up with them when I argued him into it. I still wondered about the Canadian men. Did he have a secret pact with them? Wait until morning, Captain Clark said. I'll bleed her tonight and I'll take a pint of blood. No more, Captain Lewis said. I wish we had leeches, but I've seen none on the Missouri except in human form. There's only one sharp knife left out of the 3 we owned before the boat turned over. One's enough, Captain Clark said, if it's sharp. So boys and girls, what's happening right now is Captain Clark wants to bleed her to help her get well. Well, that's a thought that people thought that if you would let out the bad blood, that the human being would recover more rapidly. That's just silly. So people used to actually put leeches on the sick people, and the leeches were these animals that are kind of like slugs, and they had hooks, and their mouths would hook into your skin and suck your blood. And the leeches would become engorged with blood, and then you could pop them off. but it's really gross. And if they didn't have leeches, they would use a knife and they would just open one of your veins and let the blood out. Aren't you glad we don't do that anymore? First of all, it didn't work. Second of all, it hurts. And third of all, it makes you more weak because you need your blood in your body to help carry oxygen to your brain and your muscles and the rest, your whole body. You need oxygen. And so the less blood you have, the less able your body is able to oxygenate every part of your body. So that is a good thing that we don't do that anymore. Back to the story. Whether the knife was sharp, I do not know. They gave me another cup of that black stuff, and then I felt nothing when they drained my blood. But in the morning, I felt weaker than I ever had. Well, yeah, of course. And I fell into a long dream. I woke up with the sun in my eyes. Later, I found out that 2 days and nights had gone by. The boat was moving along under a bower of trees. A bower is like a little roof of trees. When you have a tree branch hanging over something, that's like a bower. That's what that means. For a while, I thought Charbonneau and I were alone with Miko, and we were going back down the river, back to Fort Mandan, the three of us. Then Captain Clark was looking at me. "You're better," he said. "You'll live. You look like a ghost, but a pretty ghost, and you will live." I wonder how much faster she would have recovered if they hadn't drained all her blood out. Not all, but some of her blood out. I bet she would have recovered faster. "Where are we?" I asked him. I still believed that I was in a canoe with Charbonneau and my baby going back down the river. "We're in Blackfoot country. At least they claim it. Do you know any of their words?" "Not many. Maybe a word or two." "They raided the Shoshone long ago when I was a child. They are fierce people." "Well, they don't like the whites." "They don't like anyone. Only themselves," I said, "and not even always themselves." "You would know Blackfeet if you saw them from a distance? Their dress, their horses?" "Yes, I would know them anywhere. Also their footprints. They do not walk with their toes pointed in like the Minnetarees or the Shoshone." "We saw a campfire yesterday and some tracks. Charbonneau thought they belonged to a party of Sioux." "This is too far north and west for the Sioux. They do not come here in the spring. I learned this from the Minnetarees." 2 days later, I had a chance to show my knowledge of the Sioux. One of the men who was pulling a long rope fished a headband with an eagle feather tied to it out of the river. The feather looked like any eagle feather, but the band, I knew it at once. It was red, a color the Blackfeet liked. The sewing, the way the sun was stitched, with arrows sticking out from it, was Blackfoot. Once my brother had killed a Blackfoot and kept his headband. It was just like the headband they fished out of the river. That night, Captain Lewis mounted a bigger guard than he usually did, and all the men slept in their clothes. We mounted a guard for 7 nights, and during the day watched for signs. We watched for buffalo, too. On the 8th day, Ben York saw a small cloud off to the west. We were on a wide bend below a high cliff. Captain Clark ordered the boats to tie up on the riverbank. He chose 4 hunters and Charbonneau, York, and me. Me, because he believed that the Blackfeet would not attack us if they saw a woman. Charbonneau, because he was my husband and very jealous. Ben York, because he had sharp eyes and ears and a keen nose. That means he could smell things really well with his nose. A keen sense of smell. He could smell buffalo when they were a long distance away. Buffalo had a strong smell, but he could smell them before anyone else did. The high cliff above the river was where Captain Clark was taking us. To look over the country, he said. Since he was worried about the Blackfeet, I thought it best to leave Miko behind. I had never left him since the day he was born. He was always nearby in the cradle board, whatever I was doing. So I asked the men who played with him the most, Sergeant Ordway and Private Cruzat, to take care of him while I was gone. It was a hard climb through brush and prickly pear. We came out on a windy peak. Below us was a broad tableland. I could see nothing except the cloud of blue smoke, but Ben York threw his head back and sniffed the wind for a while. Then he pointed. "Look!" he shouted. "There to the west, beyond the smoke! A speck! It's buffalo!" The speck grew larger. It became a river, a dark river of buffalo driven along the tableland by a string of horsemen. "Who are they?" Captain Clark asked Charbonneau. "Blackfeet?" "No," Charbonneau said. "Arikara, maybe. Assiniboine, maybe." The captain asked me who the horsemen were. I knew, but I was silent. I did not want to go against my husband. Not until the captain asked me a second time did I answer. "It's important," he said. "We don't want to run into a nest of Blackfeet if we can help it. Who are they, Janie?" Remember they called her Janie? "Blackfeet, I think," I said. "You think they are Blackfeet, or you know?" "I know." Charbonneau grunted. "You wrong. You Shoshone. Maybe Arikara. Maybe Assiniboine." I spoke up now because it was important. "Blackfeet," I said. "How do you know?" Captain Clark said. "Because Blackfeet ride black horses that have white spots on their backs." The herd came closer. Not to be seen, we crouched down in the bushes. A man on foot was running ahead of the herd. He was dressed in a buffalo robe and wore a buffalo head that came down over his shoulders. He looked like a buffalo. The man lured the herd on and on into a draw close to the edge of a cliff. He dodged behind a tree. The leaders could not turn back, for the rest of the great herd pressed hard behind them. The big part of the herd could not turn back because the horsemen were on their heels, shouting and firing their guns. Like a river, the buffalo poured over the cliffs, falling down like falling water to their deaths onto the plains below. We waited 3 days for the Blackfeet to cut up the buffalo and leave. They took only a small part of what they had killed. Hundreds of carcasses were left. Of these, we took only what we could store in the boats. The young hunter who lured the herd over the cliff had been swept out of his hiding place to his death. The Blackfeet had wrapped him in a buffalo hide and tied him high in a tree, as was their custom, to keep him safe from hungry beasts. "That's how I would like to be buried," Ben York said. "In a tree where the wind blows, the sun shines, and the birds sing." "Yes," I said, "but not soon. Years from now would be best." Captain Clark was walking around gathering flowers from the bushes. "He has gathered things every day since we left Fort Mandan," I said. "Why?" "He gathers them for the great grand white chief, Thomas Jefferson," York said. "But Captain Lewis gathers much more." "This white chief is like Chief Black Moccasin?" "Like a buffalo is like to a mosquito." "Well, if he is so great, why does he want such things as skunk skins, small fish, goat horns, hummingbird feathers, antelope skins, deer skin, buffalo hides, beaver tails, and other things, too, like owls, snakes, frogs, and lizards?" "Thomas Jefferson has a big curiosity. That's why we are here, you and all of us." Captain Clark had quit gathering flowers. "How far have you been up the river?" he asked Charbonneau. Charbonneau pointed to the snow-covered mountains. "Far. To Blackfeet country." This was a lie. Just the day before, he had told me that everything was new. He had never been in this country before. "River, she too thin," he said. "Need horses." Captain Clark was impatient. "Where do we find the horses?" "From the Mandans." Now remember, the Mandans are way far back. at the Mandan, where they had the Mandan fort. They'd have to go back all the way before they came. We turn around and go back to Fort Mandan? Good, Charbonneau said. He did not see that Captain Clark was angry. Hide canoes, go back, go talk to Mandans, get horses. Captain Clark shook his head. If we do, we'll never reach the mountains before winter comes. There's snow on them now, and this is June. By November, we'll be caught and can't move. He picked up his flowers and left with Sergeant Ordway. Charbonneau waited until they were out of hearing. Tonight, he said, we go down river, fast. He reached out and gave my arm a twist to remind me about what would happen if I did not hold my tongue. Hold my tongue? That means to be quiet. You think Captain Clark great mans, he said. You crazy Shoshone. Shoshone, they all crazy. Gone now. Blackfeet came and killed them. Your family gone now. Dead. This was a lie also. He was making up this story because he knew that I had never forgotten my people. I never talked about them, but he knew that one reason I wanted to go on the long journey was to see them alive, to see them again. Blackfeet kill Jean-Baptiste, my son Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. Kill him sure. Were the Blackfeet just an excuse? Or was he sure that Clark would fail? Sure that we would never reach the mountains before the heavy snows came? That night in the tent, when Sergeant Ordway and Captain Clark were asleep, Charbonneau took the baby and went down to the river. He knew that I would follow him. I put on my moccasins quietly, but as I left the tent, I stepped hard on Sergeant Ordway's outstretched hand. He got up, rubbed his eyes, and uttered a loud oath. Come, I whispered. Charbonneau knelt in the canoe. The cradleboard was beside him. I put Miko and the cradleboard on my back. A fire burned in front of the tent. Suddenly, from the dark, a rifle spurted flame. Crouched, holding a paddle in his hands, Charbonneau shouted at me. Sergeant Ordway was standing on the bank. He fired his rifle again. As the bullet struck the water in front of the canoe, Charbonneau dropped the paddle. Go back to sleep, Sergeant Ordway said. More prickly pears tomorrow, more mud, more slippery stones, more everything. Go to sleep. We need you. Charbonneau grunted. Much everything, he said. And that is the end of chapter 16. I hope you're liking these stories. I think they're fun. Have a good day. Bye.